to a Hope 1032 podcast.
As followers of Jesus, in whom all things were made, we acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the country of where this podcast is recorded. We acknowledge their continuing connection to the land and waters, and thank them for protecting this land and its ecosystems since time immemorial. We pay our respects to elders past, present and future, and we extend that respect to all First Nations peoples listening today.
Hope Book Club with Georgia and Simone. Because life's just better with a book.
Hi, I'm Georgia.
And I'm Simone.
And welcome to episode 51 of the Hope Book Club podcast. And Sim, I have been waiting for this all year. I don't know how many times I've mentioned Pip Williams now in the Dictionary of Lost Words. I think it's been every episode at least, 3 times?
Yeah, at least that, and definitely once a week.
I'm so excited. We are finally reviewing her long-awaited second novel, The Bookbinder of Jericho. So buckle in, because we both have a lot to say about this one. We both loved it. But welcome to Hope Book Club. We gush about books, as you can tell. We talk about literature from a hope-filled Christian lens, and we hope this podcast makes you think, makes you laugh, but most of all makes you read as well. And as we said, we're diving into our April read, The Bookbinder of Jericho by Pip Williams. And as always, it's going to be a spoiler-free episode. So don't worry, we're not going to spoil any endings. Let's get into it. So The Bookbinder of Jericho is Pip Williams' second novel. It's set in Oxford, England at the start of World War I. So around 1912, I think, is where the novel starts. Yeah. In 1914, when the war draws the young men of Britain away to fight, it is the women who must keep the nation running. 2 of those women are Peggy and Maud, twin sisters who work in the bindery at Oxford University Press in Jericho. Peggy is intelligent, she's ambitious, she dreams of studying at Oxford University, but for most of her life, her job has been to bind the books, not read them. Maud, meanwhile, wants nothing more than what she has. She's extraordinary, but she's vulnerable, and Peggy needs to watch over her. When refugees start arriving from the devastated cities of Belgium, it sends ripples throughout the entire community and through the sisters' lives. Peggy begins to see the possibility of another future where she can use her intellect and not just her hands, but as war and illness reshape the world, it is love and responsibility that comes with it that threaten to hold her back. Now, if you haven't read The Dictionary of Lost Words, Pip's first novel, I think you should do that first. Do you agree, Sim?
Look, I think it would add to it. I have to admit I haven't read that one.
Okay.
And so I read this one separately, and yeah, I think it adds to it, but it's not necessary.
So the sticker on the front says that it's the companion novel to The Dictionary of Lost Words. So it's not a prequel, it's not a sequel, but it is set in around the same time and in the same town, and there are some overlap of some minor characters, I will say that. So I think it's nicer if you have read it, because it's like, you know, you get to know the characters, but as you said, it's not completely necessary. Now, a little bit about Pip Williams as well. The short version on her website, she says, "I love to read, write and travel, and sharing the disappointments and joys of all 3 is what makes life good." I think that's really sweet.
That is really sweet.
But basically the long version, Pip herself has spent most of her working life as a social researcher, studying how people live their lives and what makes life good. And I think reading her novels, you totally get the fact that she is an academic, because these are such well-researched books. A few years ago, she kind of became bored with academic writing and journal writing, and I totally get that, because I dropped out of a master's for the same thing.
It wouldn't take much for me to get bored with that.
No, absolutely not. Well, the only logical thing she said to do was to pick her family up and travel to the other side of the world, and they decided to live in Italy for a year.
I mean, completely logical. That is definitely the next normal step.
Since then, she kind of wrote a memoir, a nonfiction memoir about her family's time there and how it changed their lives. She's written travel articles, and eventually she found herself writing these incredible novels about the women of Oxford, England in the time of World War I. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Sim, you've actually been away for the past 3 weeks. I've missed you so much. I've had to read this book alone without commentary from you, like our lunchtime chats.
I know.
How did you actually read this? Because you were reading this on planes, in airports.
I read most of it, to be honest, in either an airport, waiting for a plane, or on a plane. Almost the entire. There was the first couple of chapters weren't, but the rest was, in airports and on planes.
So it's very different to how you normally read because you yourself, you're confessed to have the novel open and then have Wikipedia open and you're like cross-referencing historical events.
I love to go down rabbit holes when I'm reading. Like, it's not just like cross-checking. I will go and have a look at something that's said and then like delve completely into that topic while it's like reading, it's like researching while reading.
Which is honestly amazing how you manage to finish books so fast because like you go down so many rabbit holes. I wonder how you get back there in the first place. But you didn't have Wi-Fi on the plane. So this was a very different way to read. How did you like it? Did you like it? Did you not like it?
I struggled I definitely struggled with it because, did not have Wi-Fi, could not go look at things, research stuff. And so I think it made it a little more difficult for me to get into it to begin with. But once I kind of got over that and just tried to turn that part of my brain off, I think I also enjoyed it a little more because I didn't keep getting distracted. Like, I just delved completely into the flow of the book, which definitely highlighted a few things for me.
Yeah, okay. How did you enjoy the pacing? Because sometimes it's a difficult one in the sense that sometimes you feel like it's going at a snail's pace and sometimes they skip like a year. Yeah. And it's like, hang on, what's happening?
And I think that was the thing that really stood out to me more because I couldn't get distracted by other things and I was on planes and stuff. So not just only did that, it bothered me so much at the beginning when it was really kind of a little slow going. There were moments where I was like, I feel like you're just telling me the same things but in a slightly different way. And like that pacing, like I struggled with until I realized it was making me feel the way Peg was feeling.
Yeah.
And it ended up adding to it. So that different pacing really made you feel like you were in a way living the life that they were living.
Yeah, it was very monotonous, slow going at times, which I guess highlighted the girls' work in the bindery. You know, they were left on their own. Their mum had died, which becomes apparent pretty much in the first few pages.
Yes.
And having just that, there was no escape because they were forced to work to be able to feed themselves. There was no one to rely on. There was no money. They lived in a boat, a literal boat,
which I loved.
I know. This is one thing I loved, that there was a map at the start of the book.
Yes.
And the map even of their little boat, the layout of their boat.
Because it is hard to comprehend if you haven't experienced that or seen that kind of thing, which I think for a lot of us we haven't.
Yes.
I know I certainly haven't. And I found the pacing with that then, that frustration, like I started feeling irritated and frustrated, I think, in the way that some of the characters were feeling too.
Absolutely. And one thing I really, really loved that I just want to highlight before we get into like the plot is just how well researched this book was.
Yes.
It's clear that Pip is an academic, that she very well researched the book. There are several events, specific events in the war that are based completely on real life, down to the names of the soldiers are the same.
Yeah.
And I actually read in the author's note of this book that she got the idea for this novel when she was researching her first one. So she actually went to Oxford, England, looked in the university archives, researching stuff. Like, I'm talking thorough research, like immersive research. And she was trying to find traces of women in this time. She's like, women literally kept the country going for 5 years while men were off at war.
Yep.
Why is there no traces of them in the university press? She ended up finding this one sheet of when the leader of the bindery, their boss, left, and they had like a farewell kind of card, and all of the women's signatures were written on it.
Wow.
This is where she got the idea for this book. She's like, okay, there's something here. Let me roll with this. And you actually see at the end of the book, she's done a scan of the actual list of these women, which is just amazing.
It's incredible, like that something so simple and just like, I don't want to say mundane, but almost mundane is the one thing that just made a stamp for women and went, we are still here.
Yeah, well, it was the only thing. Like, there were no photos. There was hardly any trace of these women. And the fact that Pip found this and was like, I'll tell you what, you're not going to be forgotten. I'm going to write your story in this book. It's just
incredible.
Just amazing. Okay, let's get into the plot, because I think the overarching theme obviously is war. And the horrors of war. We see it depicted so differently in so many different characters. But I think having Peggy and Maud as those two, well, especially Peggy as that main character, you see that when the war started, it opened up other opportunities for women, because they had to step in to the men's jobs. You see in the bindery, some of the women had to take on the job that the men were doing there, because books had to keep getting printed, pamphlets and newspapers had to keep getting printed. I want to talk about the fact that war, as horrible as it was almost this silver lining for women, and this opportunity to be heard. And it was, I guess, coincided with the rise of the suffragist movement and them slowly getting the vote. What did you think of that?
One of the things that stood out for me was in this is that she didn't glamorize those silver linings like a lot of like you look back and you look at a lot of films and books who kind of have that era, and it's sort of this like lovely glamorized and women got to do all this stuff and yay, but she didn't do that, because it wasn't glamorous and it wasn't easy, and it was still difficult. You still had to fight for that, and I think she showed that really well, and the fact that it was a total, not just opportunities, but a culture and a societal shift.
It was necessity.
Yeah.
Even if society wasn't ready for it socially, they were forced to be ready for it, because otherwise they wouldn't survive.
And one of the things I noticed for that she really kind of, I think, was realistic in is showing that people did still struggle with that as a society. Yes, it was necessary. Yes, you got to do it. And some of the girls ran to that and loved it. And it was, they really grasped those opportunities. But it still came at a cost of people not being encouraging of them doing that. One of my favorite parts is sort of this tiny little moment where one of the girls who works at the bindery leaves to go work in a munitions factory.
Yes, more pay.
For more pay and the chance to get to wear pants. And I loved that, just that little thing. But, it wasn't celebrated, her doing that. It wasn't seen as this great thing. She was actually sort of at times seen as like, how dare you abandon us, or how dare you go and take that opportunity? And I loved that little moment of like, going, it wasn't this fun, glamorous, great silver. It was a silver lining, but it wasn't a silver lining
there was no happiness.
Yes, it was still a difficult thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I really loved, there was a quote towards the end of the book where the war had kind of, ended, the soldiers were returning, or, some of the soldiers were returning. And there was a line that said, every town will have a memorial for the men, but I don't think there's going to be one for the women, which I think just proves women were so much erased from the history of that time, even though they were the ones that literally kept the country running. So many communities running,
And wasn't that the case all the way up to that even? It was just that this particular time period, women started getting a little bit of a taste of what could be, because they've always been the ones, making the houses run, cooking foods. Like it wasn't.
It's not new.
It wasn't new. No. So I think there is like that thing of true equality in that sense, and I think you see that even in some of the interactions with some of the male and female characters in this book. Aside from the societal structure, you actually see in the individual relationships a little bit more of that equality.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about trauma as well, which is obviously a huge part of this book. Not just trauma from war, trauma from family members' deaths, trauma from just having to have such hard lives in this situation. But I do want to specifically talk about the impacts of trauma from war. And we see that contrasted in the characters of Lottie and Bastian, who were both refugees that came from Belgium. Lottie was a university librarian, has come literally from the ruins of her town. She saw the library literally get demolished, burnt to ashes. Bastian was, I think he was a soldier. He could have been a university student. I'm not entirely sure, but he has also come from Belgium. They've come from literally the same place. And you see the difference in their characters. Lottie is extremely reserved. Like she is a lockbox. You don't get anything out of her. Bastian, he has been severely injured. So a lot of that is his physical recovery, but also his kind of emotional state and how he starts to deal with things differently on his own. How did you like their certain characters?
Yeah, I loved the way that they dealt with it all differently, but at the core, they were still struggling, just in different ways. And at first glance, you look and you think Lottie's struggling and Lottie's dealing with things far worse. But then you realize Bastian's just dealing with things in a very different way. And there's still a lot of trauma there that he's trying to work through. However, when it comes down to it, they're also able to understand each other in a way that the others can't.
Yeah.
And I think that was, they were completely different people. They went through, slightly different, well, especially even just as a man and as a woman in that war, they had different experiences of it, and they still didn't really talk through or be able to like help each other in any great major way, but they understood each other on a different level. And I really appreciated that, because I think that's so accurate. You can't, no matter what you're going through, what your experience is, all of that, like even if it's different, just having dealt with things or having to experience sort of difficulties in life can give you something that it's almost like that common ground. It's the
inherent understanding. You don't have to over-explain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I found that was really great. I loved seeing that relationship, or that friendship, I should say, like just how that managed to support each other without really actually doing too much.
Yeah.
They just stepped in and were there. They were literally just stood next to each other at times.
Yeah. I kept waiting for, whether it was between Lottie or Bastian, I kept waiting for them to have to kind of deal, in quotation marks, deal with their trauma as we would think of it today.
Yes.
There's a lot more knowledge about mental health and trauma, and a lot more people are more open with it. But I realized, hang on, they're not going to talk it through. This was 1914. We're in the middle of World War I. Like, this was the best way they knew how. They just had to get on with it. Yeah. And, you see throughout the book the different ways that they deal or not deal with things. But I just thought it was a very realistic picture. Yes. And I got frustrated at times, but then I realized, once again, this is what Pip Williams wants me to feel. And she's a magician.
Instead of dealing, they just helped each other get through.
Yeah. One other thing that I thought was very much woven through was this idea of privilege. Yeah. And whether that's class privilege, whether that's, gender privilege, whatever that is, it was very much an unspoken, and sometimes spoken. And I think the character of Gwen really brought that to light. Now, Gwen was a student studying at Oxford University, where Peg wanted to go. They ended up befriending each other when they were volunteering at the hospital for the injured soldiers. And they formed this very unlikely friendship, because Gwen is everything that Peggy is not, right? She's never had to work a day in her life. Yeah. She has parents that are providing for her. But they formed this bond, and you kind of see throughout the book that they help each other and get to know each other's worldviews. I really found the character of Gwen so interesting.
Same. I actually found the character, like the friendship, unlikely friendship between Gwen and then Peg and then Lottie, actually really fascinating, because with that, like Gwen became this person to Peg that sort of like Peg was to Lottie in some ways. And so like I found that fascinating, like Gwen and the way that their friendship and that sort of privilege was shown, but then also how some of what Peg found frustrating about Gwen, you could kind of see Lottie would find frustrating about Peg.
You kind of see that levels of privilege, and you only know what you know. That's the thing.
Yes.
It was very interesting, and I think it encouraged us all. Taking it back to something we can take out of the book. I think it encourages us all to examine our privilege. We are all privileged in certain ways, and especially living here in Australia. I think we have this certain level of just inherent luck that we live here, but also there is a privilege that comes with that, and we have to examine that, how we can use that for the good of those around us that don't have that privilege, how we can continue to raise people up. And I think Gwen actually did that with Peggy.
Yes.
She took every opportunity that she could and tried to, sometimes dragged Peg along, kicking and screaming because she was stubborn.
Yes.
Peg's like, I want to do this on my own. Gwen's like, let me help you. I'm literally here.
Right, yeah.
Please let me.
I loved that like Gwen had this confidence and this attitude born from her privilege of, what do you mean? Like, we can do this. Like, we can do whatever. Like, we can fight for this.
Yeah,
like,
we're going to have the vote. And Peg's like, I'm not going to have the vote.
Yeah.
I don't have property. I'm a working woman.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
And when Peg talks about her, like, walking into a room, she walks into it with confidence of she belongs in that room. And I think that attitude and that sort of just absolute confidence in her place actually helped Peg then. Because like you said, she dragged Peg along. She didn't see that Peg didn't deserve it when Peg did feel that.
Yeah.
And just kind of kept pushing and prodding and at times in a way that was insensitive because she didn't understand. And so you're right. Like that was the thing for me. I think the privilege and the way that this novel really examined privilege on so many different levels and all the intersectionality of privilege, I loved that. I thought that Pip Williams absolutely did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually do want to just read a quote about privilege in general. This is Peg kind of, I guess, reflecting on her friendship with Gwen. They'd just had a bit of a fight. She says, I remembered the first time I'd seen her at the examination school. She'd walked ahead, opening doors without knocking. I'd followed, glad for the shield of her confidence. A little resentful, but that passed. She made sure of it. The war made it easy. We were all in the same boat, everyone kept saying. And it did feel that way most of the time. But now the war was over, and the likes of Gwen would no longer be expected to muck in with the likes of me. The likes of Gwen would line up to cast their vote because the likes of me had proved that we could do the work of men. And I'm like, oh, that got me because Peg has just been working. And Gwen quite literally has never had to lift a finger in terms of labour. And she would get the privilege and Peg wouldn't. And that it floored me. I had to just close the book and just like sit in silence for 2 minutes because I'm like, that is the very idea of what privilege is. Yeah. People doing the work and other people getting the reward for it. And I think it's something that we still deal with in modern day society. And I think, it's something we have to continue working towards for sure. The big question of the book, and this is one that's on the blurb, is what is lost when knowledge is withheld? And that, when it comes down to it, when you strip away the historical context, when you strip away war, when it comes down to its bare bones, this is what this book is about. It's about having knowledge and about the power of what that knowledge can do when someone has it. What do you think is lost when knowledge is withheld?
I mean, the short answer to that is kind of everything.
That's my answer too. Everything.
It is. And I think, it really examines, it's not just about like not, it's knowledge being withheld. And I think that word is quite important because it's not just about the knowledge not being, it's there. It's there.
But only some people have access to it.
And it's not just about people not wanting that knowledge. It's about it actually being withheld, not having access to that knowledge. And so many different areas did that happen, you know, from characters not actually talking about things, withholding their own, the knowledge of where they're at and where their head's at and why they're reacting to things the way they are, all the way through to like, you know, knowledge of like academia, of becoming, you know, and having the chance to even just read books or even just have an entire book in front of you and not little sections of it.
Well, even that, and also the fact that translated books throughout history, and this is what Pip really kind of delved into quite deeply, was that translated books throughout history were they were pretty much always translated by men. So you look at, there's one specific scene where Peg is studying Homer, ancient Greek, which is just so difficult to learn anyway. And the librarian was saying, you know, this has been translated again and again and again, but the meaning has slowly changed because of the translator's different view of society and of women. There's this one particular word in Homer where eventually it they see women as concubines, kind of prostitutes.
Yeah.
That's the translation. But the librarian says, no, actually the original translation in the ancient Greek, it's more akin to slaves. Yeah. And it's like, they are such different things, but the fact that men actually viewed women as that particular way, now that was in literature forever. And that changed the way that Peg herself not only read the book, but probably saw herself as a woman.
Yes.
There was a quote that was basically, in my opinion, the men who translate Homer have not always served the women well. And it's true that knowledge and power is informed by those who are writing the books.
Yep. And you see that over and over again. Like, again, that part, like one of the moments I loved is when she pulled multiple translation versions out and put them side by side so you could actually see the change as, like, you know, as it happened. And that happens so often in literature, in translations, and I think even in society now, like even with social media, with news, like everything can be, if it's translated, you know, making sure that those translations serve everyone and not just the person translating it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wrap this up, Sim. Do you have a favourite quote from the book?
So my quote is to do with Gwen, sort of similar to that part you were talking about before, where she sort of looks at, Peg looks at Gwen and says, I looked at Gwen as if I had never met her before. Was it possible she walked through our friendship with her eyes half closed to the life I lived? And it just, that one really hit me hard in that how often do we do that?
In our own lives.
In our own lives, not just looking at the people around us and our friendships, but even looking at, you know, for this war thing really made me think about refugees and people and how we sort of view those who we don't know their lived experience, and we can't ever possibly know that. Do we walk around, do we make sure that we don't walk around with our eyes half closed?
Yeah, I love that. Mine is a bit of a love letter to books in general, because this is this is what the book's about, really, when it comes down to it. Peg talking about her work as a bookbinder. She says, when we bound these books, I thought that each copy was identical. But then I realized they couldn't stay that way. As soon as someone cracks the spine, a book develops a character all its own. What impresses or concerns one reader is never the same as what impresses or concerns all others. So each book, once read, will fall open at a different place. Each book once read, I realized, will have told a slightly different story. I think that's the story of the characters in this book. They all lived very similar experiences. They come out with very different reactions and emotions to it all. And I think that's the way we live in life, isn't it?
We do, yep. And how amazing is it to have access to books like that we can then read other people's experiences.
Absolutely. Read this book. That is my final comment about this. Read this book. It is so good.
So we do, you know, as for those who listen, often we do have a voicemail number where you can give feedback on the books we've reviewed. the books we've been loving, any questions you want to ask, recommendations you want to give. The number is 029854 7025, but it is in the show notes.
Always in the show
notes. So you can find that. You can also, and so from that, we sort of do sometimes get, people commenting. We wanted to talk a little bit about what has been said about this book. So these comments are actually from our Facebook page, because you can jump on there and comment too. So Diane said, yes. She has a signed copy waiting on her shelf.
Hey,
which honestly, signed
Does that
copy.
mean Diane's met Pip?
Oh,
that's my dream. Pip, if you're listening, I love you.
Yep, and Diane, if you're listening, we want to know more.
Yeah.
We definitely want to know more.
If we become friends with Diane, maybe we can become friends with Pip.
There we go. And then Jean said she's started reading it and it's intriguing, which, definitely at the beginning was how I felt too. And Teresa has said, I have seen lots of positive feedback for this and will add it to my reading list.
I will say this book's only been out for a couple of weeks, so yes. We're seeing lots and lots of people coming through starting to read it. So, we'd love to hear your thoughts as well. So jump on the Facebook page, or you can, give us a voicemail as well with that number. Next episode, in 4 weeks, our next book that we're going to be reviewing, we're going to be doing something a little different.
So excited.
Bringing a special guest, but we're also talking about a type of book that's not normally read cover to cover, and they are cookbooks.
I mean, some cookbooks I read cover to cover.
This is exciting. And so does our special guest. She is a big, passionate fan of reading cookbooks for fun. So we're going to be talking about that. Each of us is going to be bringing one of our favourite cookbooks. So stay tuned for that, especially if you love cooking.
And let us know, if you've got a favourite cookbook. Definitely want to hear some more. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another bookish chat as well. Send us a message. Tell us what you've been loving, what book you'd love us to review next after the cookbooks. And, you can send a voice message through to our voicemail at 029854 7025, or you can leave a post in the Hope Book Club Facebook group. So all of that info is in our show notes, and we'd love to hear from you.
And we'd also love for this podcast to reach more people. That way, the way you can help us with that is to rate, to review, to subscribe, and best of all, to tell your friends about the podcast. If you know someone who loves reading, we would love for them to join this community, so you can share it with them. We'd love to have more people join. Until then, we will catch you next time. Sim, you have a quote to end on?
Yep. So this one's from Ralph Emerson. And it's, some books leave us free and some books make us free.
Amen to that.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.